Welcome back to Hannity. While Europe is reeling from what appears to be a terrorist attack carried out by a refugee, here at home, President Obama is doubling down on his efforts to offer asylum to migrants. According to brand new statistics, the president is drastically increasing the flow of refugees into the United States, with total resettlements up 77% over the same period last year, including a whopping 390% increase in the number of Syrian refugees entering the country. Joining me now with reaction is the author of Defeating Jihad, The Winnable War, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, as well as Fox News contributor Rick Grenell. Dr. Gorka, let's start with you. 390% just from Syria alone. The total number looks to be somewhere around 110,000 refugees. I think our audience is going to be fairly shocked at the number of refugees coming into the United States in total.
And as they should be, especially when we are told by the FBI that we cannot vet people coming from active war zones where there are jihadi organizations like ISIS, Al-Qaeda. What's even more disturbing, earlier this year, Eric, the Senate, one of the committees in the Senate published a report based on Department of Justice figures that looked at who is actually executing terrorist attacks in America after 9/11. We've prosecuted 580 people in America since 9/11. 24 of them had refugee asylum status. 33 people were here illegally on visas that had expired. And they're from all the obvious places: Yemen, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq. This is a no-brainer, Eric. This is a threat that is real and is already harming Americans.
Now, Rick, have we learned nothing from Germany? Have we learned nothing from the Bataclan in Paris? Have we learned nothing from Nice, France, that sometimes, if you're bringing in refugees, sometimes they radicalize, self-radicalize, or get radicalized from the Islamic terrorist groups, and they become dangerous?
Well, certainly the Obama administration hasn't learned the lessons. And look, let's be honest, Europe hasn't learned the lessons. I'm still concerned when I look and I see throughout Europe, and specifically in Germany, just what's not happening. I'm amazed that governments aren't responding. If you're living in Europe and you're seeing this unfold, you're seeing that a gentleman has 8 different names and was on a target list, but yet is slipping in and wreaking havoc, and part of this, radical Islamic terror network is unfolding across Europe, and your government is not responding appropriately. I think this is a big problem. We need to learn the lesson of what's going on in Europe by saying we've got to slow down. ISIS has already said, Eric, that they are trying to take advantage of Europe's refugee crisis. So let's take that clue and let's slow down the process. Let's get it right. Let's work with the United Nations, who, when you have a situation like Syria where refugees are flooding out, the UN is first on the ground. They're the ones that are supposed to be looking at these refugees and deciding, are they legitimate? Are they true? Are they going to other countries? We have to be able to get this right. And when I say we, I don't just mean the United States. I mean every government in the world. We should be able to work together and figure this out.
Dr. Gorka, please help me out here. We're talking about extreme vetting. How, however, can you extreme vet someone who comes from a country like Syria when there may be no employment records, with no school records, no criminal records? It doesn't matter how much time or how thoroughly you vet these people. If you don't have the information to start with, aren't we going to get bad actors?
There's only one way to do it, Eric. So my parents were refugees. They escaped a communist dictatorship, and they arrived in a refugee camp in Austria with nothing. No money, no documents, nothing. So how were they allowed to settle down in Western Europe? And how was it that they proved to the refugee camp officers that they're not members of the secret police or agents provocateurs? How? Through an extensive series, weeks of counterintelligence interviews, whereby their story had to stand up 10 times, 20 times, until they convinced that national security professional that they are not a threat to the nation they want to live in. We don't have the manpower for that. We are already trying to track down 900 ISIS cases across America. The idea that we're going to sit down with 50,000, 100,000 refugees and have each one be interviewed for weeks on end is never going to happen. That's why Mr. Trump's moratorium on war zone refugees makes sense.
And Rick, I'm looking at the numbers, 110,000 refugees. refugees we're going to admit in the United States, let's just say we're 99% effective. That's 1,100 terrorists that we could be letting in. Let's say we're 99.9% effective. That's 110 would-be killers of Americans.
Well, look, I don't think that we are compassionless. If we look at someone who has no records, they have no, marriage certificates from the Damascus City Hall because Damascus City Hall is burned down. If you don't have proper documentation, I don't think that that means that we compassionately have to let you in. I think that means that you don't get in because you don't have the proper identification. You don't have the proper information. I don't think that that is, a moral hazard. I think that it's the right thing to do. It certainly is a product of war. It's a terrible thing. And that's why we go back to the original problem when the Syria crisis was unfolding. That's when you have to try to solve these issues. We're now 6 years past where many of those refugees who have been living in tents are frustrated, and you can't blame them for wanting a better life. But I think that the international community has to do a better job in the very beginning to solve these problems, so that once you can solve their problem, they go back to their original country. That's where they have family. That's where they know the language. That's where they want to go.
Mm-hmm. So, Dr. Gorka, we're pointing the finger at Syria, but frankly, Syria is not the only issue here. I'm looking at the numbers. Somalia actually put more, we took in more Somalian refugees than we did Syrian refugees. Iraq, almost the same number. We're talking several hot spots. Some places that are, frankly, very dangerous places. We're taking a lot of people from these countries.
Eric, you know why? Because we haven't had leadership in the world for 8 years. There are now 65 million displaced persons in the world today. That's more than we had after World War II. Because this is the price of having a world destabilized by jihadi groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab in Somalia. This will all change. Come January 20th, there will be leadership. And as Mr. Trump has said, it is much better on the long run for everybody, us and the refugees, to keep them in the region, to protect them, to provide safe zones and aid, and to keep them close to the homes that eventually they have to go back to. That's common sense.
We're going to leave it right there, guys. Thank you very, very much.